I have to go on a quick rant about pragmatism, about bringing people in the left, about having people who can make things work. So I am a pragmatist. I am a person who likes to see results. I don't like it when things are not working. There's a type of leftist that I don't think functions, but I think does serve a purpose. And that's the kind that wants to hold everybody accountable, for instance, let's say that I'm here using a VTuber avatar, and this type of leftist would point to me and go, aha, you're using idol culture. That is a product of capitalism. That means you're not a good leftist. You should not use this medium at all. It's bad. Ignoring the practicality of the medium, ignoring that, well, hold on, wait a second. If there's a capitalist dominant space and we can get lefty people in that capitalist dominant space, isn't that a good thing? Doesn't that change more minds by leaving our echo chambers? This same type of person tends to do things like say, YouTube is horrible to its creators, and so we need to make sure that we're doing our part on another platform, creating something else, and doing what we can over there, which means that we just have a giant echo chamber where everybody who already believes what we believe just continues to hear leftist shit. Okay, cool, we can all just sit around a fire and read Conquest of Bread and Capital and sing Kumbaya, but that's not useful. There's another type of leftist that seems to get a lot of criticism here that is also useful. This is people like, say, Vosh or Xanderhall, who, they have a very edgy way of communicating. They have a very mean-spirited way of getting, down and dirty in political conversations without realizing that the right has had these people for ages. So there's a practicality to taking people who exist in the right-wing sphere of politics, not because they legitimately believe that capitalism is the best in the world, or because they really want traditional fundamentalism, but because sometimes they're young and edgy and stupid. And so they gravitate towards people who are going to give them that cathartic, edgy, dunking content, like we got with early anti-SJW YouTube shit. Having edgy creators who are willing to go in and do the business of getting dirty while also spreading leftist ideas, things like trying to push for socialism, things like healthcare, things like trans rights, things like social advocacy. This is a good thing. You get the people who are there for the edgy shit, but instead of giving them only the option of finding, right-wing assholes on the internet who are going to give them that edgy shit, you give them that edgy shit in the form of somebody who's trying to push for positive change. That's a good thing. If we're going to talk about strategy going forward, I do think there's a huge practicality problem where the left acts as an Ouroboros almost. We are so concerned with eating ourselves that we don't take the time to figure out what's working and what's not. How good... There's certainly an argument to be made for how important it is to engage in self-policing, how important it is to make sure that the people in your sphere of influence are operating well and in good faith and aren't harming people. But how useful is it in the long run if we are focusing entirely on that? And there are people who focus entirely on that, on self-policing us, instead of trying to actually push forward against right-wing assholes on the internet, against people like the politicians who are pushing transphobic bills through legislation in the United States. Instead of sitting down and actually trying to do something useful, there are people who get far more concerned with how do we police our own and make sure that we've got this almost Puritan space of anarcho-communists or tankies or whatever they accept within their personal Overton window. I think it is much more practical to try to build a big tent and accept that there are multiple approaches that everybody needs to understand have purposes. For instance, I'm a leftist. I don't agree with liberal ideas in regards to capitalism, generally speaking. I think that capitalism itself is a self-defeating structure where money flows upwards instead of downwards, and eventually everybody on the bottom starves. As we see countries go into late stages of capitalism, this happens all the time. And someone who's liberal might agree with you on several social issues, but they might not agree with you on the need to dismantle capitalism. However, should you make an ally of a liberal? Yes. Because that person still does agree with you that social change needs to happen, and by including them in your space, you can still get them to move further left. You can get them to accept that, oh, wait a minute, the social change that I want is in many ways directly linked to the capitalist systems that I'm trying to advocate for. Maybe a solution would be for me to not advocate for those destructive economic systems so that I can get the social change that I want. But you know how you don't convince that person? By just yelling and screaming at them that they're a capitalist and therefore they're evil and therefore they're bad and therefore they need to go and hang out with the right-wing people because you don't accept them in your space, and all you've done now is create a center-right liberal who might slowly become a fascist. That's what you've done there. That's what you've done. Functionally, you have not created a space in which this person can move further left, can become a more positive force for change. All you've done is you've made it to where their only avenue for you as an individual is to leave you, because you're being antagonistic, and go towards those more toxic spaces. This is why I think a multifaceted approach, where the left is concerned, is necessary. We need to find a healthy line between purity testing, which I think is useless. All it does is lower the amount of people in your space. We need to find a line between purity testing and doing nothing. I think the healthy line between that is figuring out where we can self-police to try to make sure that people aren't being stupid. Like, consider if there's a leftist on the platform and you like their policies, you like what they advocate for, but they use the R slur, and you try to point out, hey, this kind of marginalized people who otherwise would love to listen to your stuff, that is a good form of self-policing. But if you take the fact that somebody's done that and then you just hammer them and rail them and rail them and rail them and make Twitter threads and constant call-out posts, and now you're starting to move into the purity testing thing. Now you're starting to move into the area where this person is just going to look at you and go, you know, instead of changing for the better, now I'm just going to do this to spite you. And I don't think that that's healthy for a movement. I don't think that's good in general. I want to see positive change in the world. I do. But I don't think that positive change is going to happen if we continue to isolate ourselves. Plain and simple. We need to find ways and methods that allow more people to enter this space, and we need to find practical ways of doing it. Figure out what appeals to people who, when they hear the ideas that socialism actually stands for, when they hear things like, oh, I want democratically owned businesses, I want workers to own the means of production because I think that CEOs are harmful. They hear that and they go, you know, that actually makes a lot of sense. Money flowing upwards into a CEO versus money being diversified around the workforce, that actually sounds like that would be better. But a lot of people don't know that that's what socialism is. A lot of people hear socialism and they just think, oh, that's what happens when you use taxes for healthcare in the United States. That's what they think when they hear that. Because the right has been so good at demonizing these things. If we're already on the back foot, if we're already in a losing battle, why would we ostracize potential allies when we could be trying to bring more people in to help fight the causes that we're trying to work through? But that is just my take on that, on practicality, on trying to make sure that we have better strategies going forward for the left. I'm no paragon, and I'm still a small channel where this is concerned. I'm no authority on leftist strategy, but I am going to give my opinion where I think it's due. So there, that's where I sit. We insert in the video tagline here.